The campus of the Boone County Sheriff's Department will soon look a lot different. For a couple of years now, we've been following the plans to move the 911 center from the city to the county. The new facility will be built next to the Boone County Sheriff's Department, and Boone County Sheriff Dwayne Carey joins me this morning live to talk about this major project. Well, Sheriff, it has been a long process for this, but there's been a reason for that, right?
Yes. A couple years ago, we identified the need to not only expand the facility, but add staff. It had been about 20 years, and we had not added call takers. We were noticing a problem with people calling in for 911 emergencies that were being placed on hold or they weren't able to get through. And so we started looking at that as a whole for about a year or so, identifying all of the problems. It obviously was space within the building and the number of staff. The interesting thing about that is with the space restrictions, we couldn't add staff. And so it ended up transferring from the city to the county with the ballot issue in 2014 in April. And then we've been basically working through the process ever since.
Yeah, and lots of little details that you've been trying to figure out. First off, let's kind of talk about where it's going to be built. The Sheriff's Department, you have a lot of room there, out there, and kind of talk about where it's going to be in relation to the Sheriff's Department and kind of the setup.
It's going to be on the northwest part of our law enforcement campus, so next to the annex building that we built probably 5 or 6 years ago for added space for us. We have a training room in there. We house internet crimes unit, our drug unit in there. So it'll be in that northwest corner. The nice thing about the layout of the ground is that initially, if people remember the schematic that we had during the ballot phase, there was a second building that was for storage of equipment like tower equipment, large equipment that you can't just keep in office space. But with the layout of the ground, we were able to get an unfinished basement in the primary building, so now we're not going to need the second building. So that's going to be an added plus as well.
Yeah, would there be even room to add on in case the city continues to grow, the county?
Yes, we have contention to where we can add on to the south and we can also add on to the west. So during the design phase, we had all of the user groups involved, and I really appreciated that about Dan Atwell, the presiding commissioners, because everybody was at the table to work through that design phase. Now, having everybody at the table slowed the process down, and so we got a little bit behind, but the big thing is we wanted to get the building right because we're looking at this to be a 30 or 40-year building, and so we didn't want to build it too small and then have to go back to the voters or try to get more money to build on in a 5-year period. We want this to last this community for 30, 40, 50 years. And so the design phase was all about trying to identify the technology, what was going to be needed for software, hardware components, what was going to be needed in the building. Because if you look at this, the 911 facility now, and you've been there, is tiny, and it only houses 911. So this building is going to have 911. It's going to have Office of Emergency Management, which Scott Olson, Chief of Boone County Fire, does now. The Incident Command Center, which is in the basement of the Armory, and we did many stories on that, where it was also doubled as a daycare. That's going to be housed in this building as well, plus the IT component of all of that. So you're adding 3 different components in with 911 to get to this building that is roughly around 25,000 square feet. It doubles the size of the 911 center that we have now. And the other key, as I mentioned earlier, is the present location. We can only have 8 operators working at one time because we only have room for 8 consoles. This building will allow us to double that space so we can add staff, which we've already been doing ever since the ballot issue passed in November. We started hiring call takers. We've added the supervisor of the IT. We're in the process of hiring the director right now. A training coordinator has already been hired because Joe Piper, as the interim director, was actually trying to do that job responsibility and train new employees. So there have been several things that have happened since April. The process is going well, time consuming. The user groups, including myself, we've kind of been phased out of the process. It's now more in the hands of the treasurer and the auditor and the commissioners, but it's gone really well. We're hoping to, if we get the notice to proceed, the building will start sometime here first quarter of 2015 with hopeful completion of early 2016.
Oh, that would be great, because I know you've been putting a lot of time into it. One component you talked about, technology upgrades. Are you excited about some of the new equipment, and do you feel like that'll help your deputies responding to calls and all officers in the area?
Well, I think it's going to help 911 probably more, but we are the beneficiary of that new technology. And so, again, the interesting thing is when the IT department and 911 identified the technology, it actually came in really close close to the ballot estimates that we had done in our preparation work. And so the nice thing that I think the voters will appreciate is the money that's been coming in ever since around November when the merchants started first collecting it. That money will be able to be used for the technology. So it's not part of the bond. We don't have to borrow money. We're going to be able to pay for that kind of with cash flow from the money that's been collected. So upgrading CAD is going to be the computer-aided dispatch is going to be a huge thing for everybody. Yeah. And those types of technology upgrades are really needed in our community.
One more quick question. Do you think there'll be any growing pains with this?
Oh, anytime you have change and growing pains, you know, I think that's the reason why the commission is wanting to get the new permanent director in place as the process is going. But yeah, I mean, there's always bumps in the road. It's going to be challenging. You know, I try to tell everybody, you know, keep the big picture in mind because it's going to be a long road.
All right. Well, Sheriff, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.